So in this video, we're going to break down what charisma actually is at its core. Because it's a very mystical thing and many people have not the slightest clue as to what it is or especially how to explain it. And then you hear these people that speak about, just read How to Win Friends and Influence People, that book, which literally just talks about one aspect of charisma, which is the coming forth aspect, which is the connection building aspect of like, oh, look someone in the eye, give someone attention, seem very interested in them, remember their name, this kind of shit, which is all just niceties, right? Which can have their place, but certainly are very, very one-sided and one-dimensional perspective there, because you've probably noticed that, hey, many times, if you're very nice to someone, if you're very much giving them your attention, seeming very interested, they just see you as a low-value person. And they don't actually value you because you're coming from a place like you're subpar to them, like you're inferior to them. And so there's two different dynamics, right, that we have to establish to understand what the exact sweet spot of charisma is. And those two different dynamics are essentially authority, respect, attraction, value, those kinds of things. Significance, distance, etc. Right? And on the other side of the spectrum, we've got connection, we've got rapport, we've got comfort, we've got, a relation, those kinds of things. So essentially, this is what I just said to you. On the right side of the spectrum here, we have the things that are coming together, right? And on the left side right here, we've got the things that are actually kind of, this indicates we're at the same level, we're in rapport, we're on the same tribe, right? This side essentially indicates that I am above you, right? And many people say like, oh, that's toxic, this or that. Look, the world is literally the world. It's fucking directed by power, it's directed by influence, it's directed by value, primarily. People literally move towards value. What is value? Value is anything that improves your chances of survival and or reproduction, right? So that's why aligning with a person who's rich, who's high status, mostly who's high status, is gonna, be so attractive to anybody, and in many cases will override any ethics, okay, because it increases someone's chances of survival subconsciously. So these things all indicate that if the person was to align with you, then their chances of survival would go up. So essentially, you always got to think about it like this. If two people are meeting, right, you have a person here, you have a person here. There's always one person that's going to be above the other person, okay? And there's always one person that's going to be trying to get into rapport with the other person more than the other way around. And so if you want to use that for yourself and you want to actually understand what charisma is and how you can use it, then you want to have the sweet spot between this distance. And that's what this symbol or this center point, this sweet spot, represents. So charisma in one sentence is essentially the sweet spot between having authority, being respected, being attractive, having value, having significance in someone else's eyes, right? So it's the perfect balance between being very cool, very valuable, very authoritative, and still having a connection, still being relatable, still being in rapport with someone. Because you can be too much this to where you're just a too distant asshole, too distant rock star, whatever, where there's just no rapport left, right? Okay, you're so out there, but there's zero connection. You know what I mean? Because you're so far away. Now, you might be very cool, you might be very authoritative and this and that, and you might be very respected to some extent, but like there's no rapport there, there's no relation there. So you don't have the optimal point of influence and of charisma. But at the same time, if you have too much of this, then you're just like the brother, the family member, right? Or the friend who's just undervalued, even though they might be more valuable. right? But because of how you're representing yourself, right? And the relational context that you're creating, you're essentially undervalued over time, right? Because there's just too much rapport, there's too much connection, there's too much familiarity even, right? We can add that. So it's between striking the perfect balance between those 2 points. So then the question becomes, how do we strike that balance? And honestly, that's gonna come down to you developing the following skill over time. Whenever you meet a person, you wanna kind of feel subconsciously where you are at on the scale that I just drew before this. And so you wanna think of it like a weighing scale, right? So let's say that I can feel with a person that I have a bunch of rocks on this side of the weighing scale, meaning the value side, right? And I don't have as much on the connection or comfort side. Then that means that I can start focus on the comfort side and place a bunch of rocks on here. And then this will go down, right? And then we will be in the perfect sweet spot, okay? Now this doesn't represent that it has to be the same amount of rocks, because look, you gotta understand, this sweet spot is a variable with every person that you're interacting with how you enter the situation, like how you look and those kinds of things, your natural kind of given things. Because if you look like an absolute fucking murderer, you know, then you have a lot more leeway to be more leaning into connection, right? And being nice and stuff like that, than if you look like a fucking pussy, then you gotta be a lot more tough, right? So, and that's also why, guys, like, I can prove all of this to you so easily. Because I'll tell you this, if there's a very, very hot girl, right, that's just normally nice, doesn't do anything special, but she just says hello to waitresses, says thank you to people, smiles, like, that's normal, right? Anybody could fucking do that. She's normal nice. People will be like, oh, she's so nice, she's so sweet. No, she's fucking not. She's a normal fucking human being. Or if there's a celebrity, right, that's like, whatever, right, celebrity, this, that, and then he just normally shakes people's hands, he normally says hello to waiters, thanks people for opening the door for him, whatever. People are like, oh, he's so polite, or this, that. No, he's not. He's a normal fucking human being. Now, why do people overblow it so much? Because the person already has so much value established that they don't need to be like that, and that's why this weighs much more. You get it? So it's like, another analogy I'll give you is like, look, if you're approaching a girl, for example, right? And then it's like, let's say that you're literally a fucking Justin Bieber or whatever, right? Celebrity. And then you say hello. If you are that, you can be very nice, you can be very beta or whatever, you can be very sweet, because you have to really bring yourself down, right? Because you're entering from that kind of position, because you already have so much value and status established. Now you can even take it too far then, right? You can even overdo this at that point, okay? And we see celebrities do that all the time, but nevertheless, you can start like that more. But if you're entering as just a normal person, then, you know, if you just start being nice, it's not gonna fucking work, because you have to establish a value. And that's what, like, that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, just doesn't talk about at all, like zero. It's just about how to be nice and how to do this side of the equation. But this side is way fucking harder, right? This side is way, like, this side, anybody can do this, right? You only know that you're a master at social skills if you can get what you want in any social situation where you are entering like 10-0 behind, right? Where you're entering from a position where you're like, you don't have a leg up, right? You don't have any status yet. And then you got to manufacture that status, right? And that's very difficult to do, because then you have to communicate in a certain way. So let's talk about that, right? Because anybody knows how to do this, connection, right? That's just giving someone your attention, looking someone in the eye, right? That's just remembering their name. That's just doing something nice, saying a compliment, asking about things that they are interested in, right? Regular, normal ass rapport building shit, right? That kind of stuff. But how do we establish and spike more value? Because maybe in the networking scenario where we're not making as much money as the rest, or maybe in the social dynamic where we're not as attractive of a partner as the rest, or maybe in the, you know, business scenario, we don't have the best deal, whatever it may be. Well, how do we spike value? Okay? And that's essentially what we're going to talk about, because nobody knows how to do that part of the equation. How to spike value is, once again, first of all, understanding what is value, right? What comes before value is like actually that value is attraction. Attraction is value, right? Now, when I say attraction, I don't mean like male to female necessarily, right? I mean attraction in terms of, literally just human to human. Like attraction doesn't have to be sexual, okay? Attraction can also just be, that guy is cool, or he's, funny or whatever, you know what I mean? So it can also be just a general, like that's what I mean. Attraction can be whatever you're attracted to in terms of whatever you're pulled towards, whatever grabs your attention, whoever you like, whoever you want to kick it with, that kind of shit, right? And so, or whatever deal you're pulled towards, and subconscious layers within that. So with that being said, it all comes from value, right? Now, if we're just talking about human to human, value essentially is anything that subconsciously gives you the idea that your chances of survival are going to go up, and reproduction, right? Now, what creates that is essentially status, right? And how you communicate status is in two different ways, right? So how you communicate status is by your subcommunication, and by others' subcommunication, okay? So mainly those two things. And then there's a third kind of way where it's just like more superficial shit, right? So obviously you have superficial shit like a watch or something, like guy to guy that can signal status, right? But this is way more powerful than that, okay? So that's really also indirect. This is direct, right? Because I'll tell you this. Let's say that someone has a cool watch, right? RM or whatever, but they're not, communicating in a confident manner, and someone else in that environment doesn't have that watch, but is communicating much more confident. Then you're still going to think that the dude who's much more confident has shit together way more, right? Even if he doesn't on the surface right away look like that materially, right? So that's why we're talking about the communication. And why is that most powerful? Because humans in their subconscious brain have a little thing that scans for value, right? It scans for status, and it scans who is on the top and who's on the bottom of the totem pole, right? Who's on the top and who's the bottom of the hierarchy, the social hierarchy. And why do they do that? Because it's a survival mechanism. Because the person who's higher in the status hierarchy, you want to befriend them, you want to be cool with them. And that's also why in some scenarios, if you feel like you're lower on the status hierarchy, then you're going to be more inhibited in terms of your humor, your confidence, your voice, your loudness, those kinds of things. So that's how that works. And if we want to hack this, it really comes, the most fundamental thing is that there's essentially three paradigms to think from, right? It's be, do, and have. So if we want to really, have the results of being high status and stuff like that, then to be able to translate that, we got to do actions that make us look high status, right? Speak in a way that makes us look high status, like communicate that we have value, communicate in a way that we have value. Now, this does not mean, by the way, real quick, that you shouldn't build your own value, that you shouldn't get rich, that you shouldn't have cool clothes, all of that. I do all of that shit. Like that's literally the majority of my life, that what I focus on. But still, you want to have this as the foundation, okay, so that you're not dependent on anything external. That being said, though, you want to use this mentality to get those things instead of getting those things to get this mentality. That's the switch, right? And then the being, okay? So being is essentially just you having the inner mentality already adjusted so that the doing and the having comes automatically. Now, that's actually very simple. And I'm going to probably give you a baffling thought. And that is that changing who you are being is nothing but a choice. It's essentially awareness plus choice. So if we want to communicate value, right, then we're going to have to come from a place that we have value. And how we do that is by understanding what currently is our default, right? And our default is probably, for example, a 4 out of 10, right? So we're right here. So if you enter a social scenario, sales conversation, a dating scenario, whatever, you're probably come from this identity, right? And then you're gonna speak from this identity, and then people are gonna give you the feedback, right? And then that reinforces that you are this, right? So if we want to change that, it's actually extremely simple. You literally, before you enter, assume that you are this. You enter and you speak from this, and then the environment speaks that back, and that becomes a reinforcing belief system that then speaks it more, and now you're in an upward spiral. So it's essentially stepping into the inner mentality of someone who is this. And the training wheels that you can use to do so, right? You know those little side wheels that bikes have? These training wheels are going to be your imagination. So if you just imagine, like, hey, how would I actually act if I was the highest status person in the world? How would I act if everybody already liked me? How would I act if all these people already approved of me? How would I act if it didn't even matter? Who would I be if I was a billionaire? How would I behave? How would I walk through this room? Because nobody else knows, or if that's true or not true or whatever, you know? How would I behave if I already had 10 Victoria's Secret model girlfriends? Whatever makes it click for you in that specific scenario, it's your imagination that gives you the blueprint, that gives you a kind of a map of like what it would look like to be high status in that environment. And then you step into it and you act from there. And you can visualize briefly, see how you would be, shift into that, and then act from there. Now that's not necessarily easy, and it's going to obviously crumble because it's new. It's not your default program yet. It's not a habit yet. And so that's where essentially the idea of the conscious mind and the subconscious mind comes in. So it's very, very simple. People overcomplicate all of this, but it's essentially going to come down to the fact that you have a conscious mind and you have a subconscious mind. And what we're doing here is we're using awareness to basically, instead of our default 4 out of 10, right, we're choosing a 10 out of 10. And then from there on, we're choosing to act from here. And the more we do that, the more it comes into our subconscious, and then it becomes our default. So yes, in the beginning, it is going to be kind of like pushing yourself to do so, consciously pushing yourself down this mental trajectory. But over time, it becomes a habit and therefore automatic, right? It's just like any new habit. You can teach yourself to communicate from a high status place, from a new place, from a place of offering value, from a place of not being non-apologetic, from a place of non-confrontation seeking instead of confrontation avoiding, right? And I'll tell you, I'll tell you a quick example of something that's non-social. When I first started boxing, I remember vividly, I was like going into the boxing training and this and that, and then people were kind of fucking me up, you know, because I just started, and then I was fighting in the street all the time, but that's different than boxing, okay? And, you know, I was like very confrontation avoidant. I was trying to like not piss the other person off in the first couple times because I was like, oh, then they're gonna fuck me up, right? But what actually happened is they were gonna fuck me up because they saw I was kind of scared. And that's just how it works in the fucking Netherlands, if you've ever been there. And then I was like, well, fuck this. I'm just gonna go actually in hard. And they were going hard as well, but it was like from a different mental place. Like instead of being confrontation avoidant, instead of being like protective, I went forward, right? And I did a million times better, right? And it was just because I decided that before I went into the sparring, I said to myself, hey, I'm going to stop this. I said, not that. I don't want to do that. And I'm just going to go into the sparring right now as this. I'm choosing now, be confrontation seeking, be okay, go into it, go forward. Instead of this going backward. And even it's kind of like chi. You know, when you're like backward, when you're trying not to get hurt and stuff, it just hurts more. But when you're just like, and you just and you just go forward, somehow it doesn't hurt, and somehow the other person now becomes the retrieving person, right? And so it's very, very interesting how that works. And it's the exact same thing in social situations. Like if you switch that kind of a mental stance, and now you come into it from a different mental stance, then boom, you're going to be a million times more effective. Many people walk on eggshells around other people. If you shift that from walking on eggshells to being like fully expressive and actually seeking right? I'm not saying creating confrontation, but not being completely okay with any confrontation or any whatever, you're actually going to have it less, and you're actually going to notice that you're treated a million times fucking better, and you get what you want out of life, and you have power and you have control, not from a toxic place, but from a place of actually not being a fucking little pussy. Okay, and that's how it works. So you shift who you are being, therefore you communicate out of that place, and you don't have to think and remember little words and lines, because you just think, how would I do if? What would I say if? I'm coming from this inner place, from this mental stance. So what would I do then? And then automatically the answers will come. And over time, you can let go of the training wheels and it'll be automatic. And that's true charisma. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want more help, check the link in the description, and I will see you in the next one.